So, about that Garb of Thrones finale, huh? Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. I've never seen a single episode of Game of Thrones, and honestly, at this point, I do not regret it. Also, I know that the Game of Thrones finale is like old news now, but I wrote the script a month ago before my old camera broke, so sorry if the audio on this one's really bad. But I do think it's important to talk about it because I think it's indicative of a larger trend where writers tend to rely less on accurate storytelling and more on subversions and the twist that is usually just the writers throwing anything at the wall and seeing what sticks, which leads to it being generally unexpected but also unsatisfying. Now, I'm not saying all subversive media is bad. There are actually great subversive shows and movies that predate the current trend, as well as stuff that came out alongside all of the bad subversions. And subversions are necessary for art forms and trends to evolve, or else we'd be still telling the same exact story over and over again. Subversions, like any other trope or plot, are just tools for the writer. If the writer is talented and intentional, you end up with a fantastic work of art that absolutely blows your mind. But that's too hard. Generic director number 73 only knows what he learned from nitpicky internet critics and his own lack of ingenuity. But not to fret, generic number 73. I think I can help you. I think we need to talk about StarKid.
What an ass! What a bitch! What a cock! The guy who didn't like musicals!
Now, I've been aware of StarKid for almost as long as they've existed. The Harry Potter musical series entered my periphery around 2010, but it's only been in the past year or so that I've actively gotten into them. They make consistently good, funny musicals, and they upload them online totally for free, so they're pretty cool. And they're no strangers to parody.
I can't go to Pig Farts. It's on Mars. You need a rocket ship. Do you have a rocket ship, Potter? I bet you do. You know, not all of us inherited enough money to buy out NASA when our parents died.
Satire.
I believe that if we burn enough things, we can change the climate permanently.
Or fourth wall breaking.
Joe Walker dies!
Or fourth wall breaking.
Oh no, you guys. Do you think that Jafar could be right about Aladdin? Me neither!
Or fourth wall breaking.
What, their names?
Harry Tit? Grandpa, you're setting a bad example for our pioneers here. You're gonna make them think it's a good idea to name their wagon party Stupid Things.
Well, they should. It'd be real fun.
You killed the whole romantic mood we had.
No, I can be romantic. I can be romantic. Come on, guys, help me out. Play some. What are you? What are you? The Watchers with 1,000 eyes. Why do you want to watch us die? Will that entertain you? You sick bastard.
No, seriously, the entirety of Trail to Oregon is one long fourth wall joke followed by a 7-minute long fart joke. Jeff Blim is a powerful, terrifying man. I love him.
I live here. No, I live here. No! You're just squatting here. Wait. If I'm you, then that means I killed my parents?
Okay, Jesus Christ, I don't know what's going on here.
Anyways, their most recent show, The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, is easily one of their best shows, if not their best show period to date. And it's maybe one of the best subversions ever written. Before I dive into that though, if you haven't seen the show yet, please do. It's on YouTube entirely for free, so go ahead and watch it because I'm about to spoil absolutely everything. Okay, so a refresher for those who don't listen to the soundtrack daily. The plot is about Paul, an everyman in the most boring sense of the word, who lives in a town called Hatchetfield and hates musicals. When a meteor strikes the old Starlight Theater, the town is overtaken by an alien spore that transforms the citizens into singing zombies controlled by a hive mind. Paul, along with his barista crush Emma, and his friends from work must find a way to stop the spread of the virus and save the world from being trapped in a musical. It's much scarier when you think about the implications.
Are you frightened?
First, I just want to acknowledge how good this show is, like, outside of the plot. Like, the music is ridiculously catchy, and I catch myself singing it literally all of the time. Also, this show is incredibly funny. The jokes are all amazing and made me laugh even on repeated viewings, which is a pretty incredible feat for a comedy as a whole. I'm convinced there will never be a funnier moment in theater, musical, or film history better than the "Sing the Beginning of Moana" bit.
Not aliens.
Sing the beginning of Moana.
What?
I said sing, goddammit.
Moana! Make way! Make way! Consider the coconut! Consider its tree! This is what we need, and no one leaves! I didn't like that movie.
Circle of life.
All right. That was terrible.
But moving into the actual topic of this video, part of what makes The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals so fantastic is just how layered and winding the plot is. Because Paul doesn't actually save the town, and by extent the world, from becoming mindless singing zombies. The apotheosis overcomes him, he becomes one of the infected, and he doesn't even manage to destroy the meteor that controls everyone, sacrificing himself in the process. It's inevitable. And when you go back to rewatch the show again, you realize that this wasn't just a twist out of nowhere, it was foreshadowed the entire time. There's a big motif throughout the entire show about saving the planet. It starts with Greenpeace Girl harassing Paul to donate money, which leads to this conversation.
Wow, you're a real humanitarian.
And you come on a little strong with that whole save the planet bit, as if I'm gonna do that single-handedly.
The first time we encounter the aliens in true form, they're singing,
Do you wanna save the planet?
Don't you wanna save the planet?
Do you wanna save the planet?
Professor Higgins has an entire monologue about how these aliens offer a second chance at actually saving the world by creating world peace.
Protecting us from what, Emma? From the end of the world? What's protecting us from nuclear holocaust, climate change, overpopulation, Emma? The world was already doomed. Not by them, but by us. I was trying to save something that could not be saved. Until now.
And then Paul's conversation with Greenpeace Girl comes back up again and let it out.
I thought you didn't care about saving the planet.
Back off, Greenpeace Girl!
But in the end, Paul was right about not being able to single-handedly save the entire world. His efforts end up being worthless. The infection spreads to the mainland, and basically everyone becomes infected, and then the show ends. In the beginning, his insistence that he is not able to single-handedly save the world seems like the beginning of a character arc, and while it does serve as that in the narrative proper, as the apocalypse does essentially push him to become a better friend and a better person in general, it does have an incredibly dark undertone to it when you know what happens in the end. Going back to the opening number, a good chunk of what's set up actually ends up being totally inaccurate. See the dichotomy between
Greatest stories ever told. Have a hero who must be bold.
and Paul being pretty content just to get the hell out of Hatchetfield up until he learns that he has to destroy the meteor in order to save Emma.
They learn a sense of right and wrong, and better learn the sense through song.
Paul doesn't learn right and wrong from the music. In fact, he loses his humanity and therefore his morality when the apotheosis comes upon him and he actually does sing.
It's the end of the world, Paul. If you don't sing.
The end of the world ends up coming because Paul sings. There's a good probability that if he and Emma had found a boat and gone across to the mainland, the infection may have stayed contained. They would have at least probably had a greater chance of survival. In fact, the only line that ends up being accurate is,
And he finds after a cute little barista, isn't that worth a show-stopping fiesta, yeah?
because,
If you just give us one last show, stop the number with Emma front and center. A cake line is inevitable.
not to to mention that the title of the show itself actually ends up foreshadowing the ending. It's not called The Guy Who Doesn't Like Musicals. It's called The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals. Also, the infected themselves end up being incredibly morally gray for a group that brutally murders people in order to bring apotheosis upon them. They constantly ask what people want.
What do you want, Paul?
Yet, when Paul finally tries to be a true hero, they use that very point to try and dissuade him.
And what about you? You die too. Is that what you want?
It doesn't matter what I want.
We think it does, Paul.
And we want to hear about it.
Even then, though, there are still implications that the infection replaces what an individual's actual wants are. I cannot believe I am taking this musical number seriously, but that might be why Mr. Davidson completely forgets what he wants when he calls his wife and what do you want.
Carol, my love, I want you to choke me out at night. I want you to choke me.
This seems like a private moment.
I want you to choke me.
Like, who is this for?
I want you to choke me while I jerk off. I just, wanted to tell you something. I forgot what it was.
See also the dichotomy between what it means to love and what it means to obey. Paul is in love with Emma in the end, not necessarily because he liked her before, which is true, but because it also serves the hive.
The hive needs to feed. Happiness is guaranteed.
On top of this, they're incredibly manipulative, whether it be Alice guilt-tripping her father and not your seed.
Did you know that I wanted to live with you? Why does it hurt to love you? Why am I in pain? Why does it hurt to know you? You let me down again.
Paul's absolute breakdown and let it out.
I've never been happy. Wouldn't that be nice? Is this the secret? Singing and dancing through life.
Am I crazy?
Maybe I've always been
Become what I've hated.
or maybe I never did.
Or Salmon, you tied up my heart.
You tied me down. Now break me open with your love and mercy. Just let me go, and I love you.
I love you too, Sam, but I cannot let you go.
They're clearly in tune to the emotions of both their hosts and the remaining human characters in order to manipulate them into doing their bidding. It's incredibly sinister, but given the limited amount of information we're given about the main characters, it's also incredibly hard to tell whether or not these spores are actually trying to make the characters' lives better. After all, we encounter them all at fairly low points in their lives. Charlotte in a toxic marriage while cheating on her also cheating husband with Ted, Bill following his divorce and only being able to see his daughter one weekend a month, unable to compete with his ex-wife's wealth and power over Alice, Emma after the death of her sister and trying to pull her life together by funding her way through community college by working 2 terrible jobs. These are all people who are clearly unhappy and not necessarily being their best selves at the time. Ted, the definition of moral ambiguity within the show himself, puts it best.
Listen, sweetheart, the world has changed, all right? There are no creeps, there are no heroes, there are only people who are alive and people who are fucking dead!
Nobody there is a good person, they're just still alive, unhappy and wanting something. Even if it's not something that keeps you lusted.
I'm just a boss, I'm not an idea guy.
Could they be happy just finding what they want? And what is this? A plot twist? A subversion in the video essay itself? No, I'm just messing with you. But that is the brilliance of this show, whether you prefer the reading of the infected as dangerously manipulative or as simply misguided a la Thanos, both interpretations work. The guy who doesn't like musicals doesn't need 30 layers of meta to make sense, but the meta doesn't detract from the original experience. You know, the way meta is supposed to work. I could go on about how great this show is. It has some really great biting satire on the state of America and how it compares to the apotheosis.
The loudest become the strong. Yeah, we're great again. America's great again.
Yeah, and you guys thought them having a song called Climate Change and Fire Ringer was bold. This video essay kind of makes the show out to be a little bit of a downer, but I promise you it is genuinely hilarious. It walks the fine line between dark humor and seriousness so beautifully, and generic director number 73 wishes he could master tone this well.
I'm gonna kick your head.
Oh. My head.
Yeah.
Not my ass.
Yeah.
All right then, let's see it, huh? Kick my head. Come on, karate champ. I want to see you kick above your waist.
Also, while I am a little sick of how hyped Showstoppin' Number is, Robert Mannion is an absolute treasure. God bless him.
The world will come crumbling down.
So, Subversion isn't inherently a bad thing. It's becoming done to death, especially because most people who are using it aren't using it well, but shows like The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals are solid proof that Subversion can be great. And I definitely wouldn't want to live in a world where this, or Blade Runner 2049, or Thor Ragnarok didn't exist. Subversion is like satire. It has to be done on purpose and for a purpose. It isn't just throwing a random twist in there because the audience didn't expect it. It's doing something that seems like a complete 180, but on a repeated viewing, it actually ended up being built into the whole plot the entire time. And subversive media doesn't have to have a happy ending in order to be satisfying. The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals ends with the entire cast becoming hive mind musical zombies. You just have to be smart with your writing. That's hard.